Hello, and welcome to Shrink, the podcast for the mind. I'm Philippe and I talk to the people who want to have a better understanding of their issues with weight and body image. Today, I want to talk about something that quietly weighs so many of us down, and it's guilt. You know, it's that little inner voice that says things like, you shouldn't have eaten that. You should be more patient. You're not doing enough. It's a voice that so many of us know all too well. And we often think it's just there to help us, to keep us in line, to make us better people. But most of the time, it just keeps us stuck. So, in this episode, we will explore where guilt comes from. I will explain why I feel like it's so toxic, and how replacing guilt with responsibility and empathy can help us actually grow. We will also finish with a short guided reflection to help you release some of that guilt and reconnect with self-kindness. So, if you ever felt like you're not doing enough, or you're not being enough, this episode is for you. Compass, a sign that we care. And sometimes it is. But for many of us, guilt has been overdeveloped. It has been trained into us since we were little. When we were children, we learned quickly that being good meant making other people happy. Maybe your parents said things like, "Don't make me sad," or "You're such a good girl when you help." In fact, "Don't make me sad" is something that my mother used to repeat quite often to me. I was saying that I wasn't feeling good about something, and she said, "Oh, you're making me sad." And that's one of the origins, a big one, of my own guilt. And little by little, we started to believe that love and approval depended on how well we behaved. And then came school, where we were rewarded for performance, not presence. Mistakes were bad. Being perfect started to feel like the only safe option. And later, society took over. We were told what a good partner looks like, what a good body should look like, and what a productive person does with their time. Spend 5 minutes on social media, and you'll find 1,000 new ways you are apparently falling short. So, guilt becomes this quiet soundtrack in the background. You're not enough. You're not trying hard enough. You're not doing it right. You start comparing yourself with others, with people you've seen sometimes on social media, and you feel like you cannot do as well as they do, and you feel bad for it. You feel guilty. So let's make this more concrete. Think about eating. Maybe you've told yourself, "I shouldn't have had that dessert." Or, "I was good today because I ate clean. I had a salad." That's guilt. It's guilt disguised as control. Or in relationships, "I should call my friend more. I should be more patient with my partner." Or even self-care becomes guilt-ridden sometimes. "I should meditate. I should go to the gym. I should go to bed earlier." It's like a list of "I should" that we keep repeating to ourselves. And it's endless. The irony is that guilt doesn't really motivate us to change. It only makes us feel bad. And when we feel bad, well, we tend to retreat, to disconnect. Guilt says you're bad. Responsibility says you did something you don't feel proud of, but you can do better next time. So one closes the door, that's guilt, and the other one, responsibility, opens it. When guilt becomes chronic, it turns toxic. It keeps us stuck in a cycle of self-criticism and shame. And when I say chronic, I mean, of course, if guilt is there most of the time, most of the days, is whatever you do or whatever you say is judged by yourself. You've got that inner voice which tells you, I should have done that. I shouldn't have said that. In my therapy work, I often see people who genuinely want to change. How they eat, how they communicate, how they care for themselves, but they're weighed down by guilt. And guilt doesn't lead to reflection. It leads to punishment. And when we punish ourselves, we don't grow. We just hide. When we act out of guilt, saying yes when we want to say no, for example, or eating to numb emotion, overworking to prove our worth, well, we reinforce the idea that we are broken. But we are not broken. We're just human. And as human, we make mistakes. As humans, sometimes what we're doing is not great. And that's okay. And that's enough. So, how do we begin to shift from guilt to responsibility and from self-criticism to empathy? Here are a few practices that can really help. First of all, name the voice. Name the voice. When that inner critic shows up, give it a name. Maybe it's the perfectionist, the good girl, or the people pleaser. And anyway, a name that you think suits that inner critic. When you name it, you create a little distance. You can say, here's that voice again, trying to keep me safe. Another practice is asking yourself, what's the intention behind my guilt? Guilt often hides a positive intention, the wish to do better, to care, to be kind, to eat more healthily. When you connect to that intention, you can act on it without the self-blame. The third practice is reframing I should into I want or I choose. I should eat better, for example, becomes I want to feel more energized. I should call my mother becomes I choose to connect because I care. That small shift brings you back to agency and to kindness. So just to recap a bit, the first practice was name the voice. The second one is ask what the intention is behind my guilt. The third one is reframe I should into I want or I choose. Now the fourth one is practicing self-compassion like you would with a friend. If your friend, your best friend, for example, or a friend, said, I feel terrible, I can't believe I did that, would you say, yeah, you're terrible, you're awful? Of course not. You would say, it's okay, you did your best, you can try again. Offer yourself the same grace. Have the empathy for yourself that you have for your friends or for your family members. And then the fifth practice is remembering that guilt isn't a measure of love. Feeling guilty doesn't mean you care more. It just means you're human. Being kind, accountable, and willing to learn, that's what matters. I know that in my practice as a therapist, I have to deal with guilt a lot, especially when I start working with a new client. And sometimes they even come and see me because they feel guilty. They feel guilty for not taking care of themselves. They feel guilty for not being good enough to others. Anyway, all these things that I mentioned before. And the first part of my job is usually to help them put guilt aside so that they can become adults, they can become responsible. And it's a big shift. It sounds obvious maybe for some of you, but I know for many people it's quite a big shift. You're not guilty of anything, well, except of course if you've done something terrible, that's obvious. You're not guilty, but you can become responsible. Because talking about food, for example, you're an adult and nobody's forcing you to have that food. You're the one who's putting this food in your mouth. So you shouldn't feel guilty about it, but you're responsible. And that gives you a chance to understand, why am I eating this way? Why am I having this eating behavior? What's happening to me? Why do I do that? You switch from guilt to responsibility. I have a client who was telling me a few days ago, when my mother cooks for the whole family, or for my children, our grandchildren, in fact, and when we leave some food on our plate, when we've had enough, she always says, "Oh, you don't like the food that I just served you. I spent so much time cooking that food for you. It makes me sad that you don't like it, or it makes me sad that it's going to waste." And so, for many, many years before we did that therapy, before she started doing therapy, she felt guilty of leaving food on her plate, because when she was young, her mother was saying things like that. And she kept on saying it, but then it didn't affect her anymore. And she was also saying, there's so many people dying of hunger around the world. How can you leave food on your plate? And, it's not like finishing your plate is going to help these poor people who don't have enough to eat, which is a terrible thing, of course. So, yeah, it's something that I hear quite frequently from my clients, but also from my friends, and sometimes from myself, from my own mind, I must say. I would like to end this recording with a short guided reflection or visualization. It's going to take 2 or 3 minutes, not more. And it's something I would really encourage you to do whenever you feel that guilt is, too present, that it's there. I think it can really make a difference. It can really help you. So take a moment to get comfortable. If you can, close your eyes and just take a slow, deep breath in and out. Notice how your body feels right now. There's nothing to fix, nothing to do. Just let yourself arrive in this moment. Now, bring to mind something that's been making you feel guilty lately. It doesn't have to be big. Maybe something small. Something you keep replaying in your head. Notice what that guilt feels like in your body. Where does it sit? In your chest? Your stomach? Your throat? Just notice it. No judgment. Now, imagine that part of you, the one that feels guilty, as a younger version of yourself. Maybe a child who's trying so hard to be good, to get things right, to please his parents. See if you can say to them gently, "You don't have to carry this anymore. You were doing your best with what you knew." Now take another slow breath in. And as you exhale, imagine that guilt softening, loosening, making space for something new, for something soft. Now repeat quietly to yourself, "I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm allowed to learn. I'm allowed to be human." You don't need guilt to guide you. You can trust your care, your values, your heart. Take one more deep breath in and slowly open your eyes. You're doing enough. You are enough. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, maybe share it with someone who needs a reminder that they are actually doing their best. And if you'd like to explore this topic more, I would really encourage you to subscribe to my podcast, because in many episodes that I've recorded for the last few years, guilt is mentioned. I talk about guilt in different situations and how toxic it is. I explain its toxicity. I also give cues like I did today to manage it in a healthy way. Take care of yourself, kindly, not perfectly, and I'll see you next time.